Hello and welcome to the Allegro 2 Footbar Podcast. I'm Nora St. John, and this is Portia Page, and today we're going to be talking about where the footbar can go and what exciting things you can do in different positions. Right now we're going to talk about position 2 of the Allegro footbar. So position 1 is the one you're used to. Position 2 is the next one up, which is really in about the middle of the carriage. This can be a difficult position to get into, so a lot of the exercises that we do here involve standing up and working around the footbar in this position. Portia's going to change the springs. She wants to go to a red for this series of exercises. And the first thing we're going to do here is what's called the kneeling hip glides. So here Portia is kneeling on the carriage, her hip is against the footbar, and she's simply going to abduct and adduct the legs, one on either side, to work through some abduction on this side and to get some nice strength and stability in the hips. It's a really interesting exercise to do. People will feel very uneven in it, and it's a nice way to get some strength and some balance through the two sides of the hips and through the lateral support structure of the pelvis. So there are the hip glides. Portia would obviously do that on either side. Now if you want to add a little something to this, you can add just some arm work, or you can add a little bit of torso mobility to it at the same time. So Portia's just adding either a little bit of rotation, which is an interesting and strange challenge there, or she's going to add some lateral flexion to it, as she was showing before. Either this way, where she's increasing the hip glide by adding the rib translation. There we go. Or she can add lateral flexion that's going to go in the direction of the hip glide. So Portia, I'm going to maybe take this a little different. Okay. Yeah, so when you push that away, there we go. You're going to take this arm up, take that nice lateral flexion, and then she's going to change and go to that side. So she's going to go back and forth, working through the lateral flexion into the hip. So again, working the whole side chain now in both strength and in stretch. So there are the hip glides. Then we're going to move on from there. I'm going to what's called high knee stretch. So you probably remember knee stretch from your basic Reformer choreography. Here the footbar is closer and higher. So Portia is going to be very high with her knees, and she's really doing a nice deep action. So bring that carriage even a little more underneath you. Yeah. This is a great place to work on getting that deep hip flexion, working some nice dynamic action of the deep hip flexors, particularly the iliopsoas complex in there. Now she's doing this with a flat back. You can also do this with a round back, which feels quite different, just like it does in regular knee stretch. And you can really get nice and deep again up into the hip flexors there, and a little bit of work through the back of the leg as well. Now while she does that, of course, the shoulders are having to stay stable and do a lot of work through all of that series of exercises. Now we're going to go into elephant here. Now this is just like the regular elephant you're used to, except that the footbar is much closer to you and the carriage is being pulled under the footbar. So here you've got some options. Option 1 is to maintain a neutral spine, and Portia's really going to simply be using the arms to do what would essentially be just some nice shoulder flexion there. The hips stay more or less over the feet, and that would be a flat back version of elephant. Then she can do a round back version of elephant, where she's going to actually keep the shoulders more in line with the wrists and let the feet go back. So there are two versions of elephant in this position. And then the last thing we're going to do is actually step off here. Actually, we can go all the way to plank. Thank you, Portia. So coming from here, we also just have a really nice plank position, which is not that different than with the footbar in the number 1 position, except for this piece where you can really get the legs underneath you and again start to work into that deep dynamic hip flexion. Now coming off of there, we're going to go into a stretch. And this is like the back splits, but it's a supported version of the back splits. So the back foot is going to be on the front edge of the standing platform. The other foot is going to be on the carriage. Portia's going to start in a nice 90-90 position. And now she's going to stand up and essentially straighten that back leg to come into this lunge position, this like arrowhead lunge position. This thigh can stay on this footbar. That gives it a lot of support and security. And now from here, she can simply straighten and bend that front knee. So here she's getting just some nice work in torso stability. Pelvis is nice and square. Shoulders are open. She's still using her hands for support here. That would be a beginner position. Now, as she gets more comfortable, she can take the arms up and bring the torso up, getting a deeper stretch to the front of this left hip, right, the anterior part of that hip. And then as we go through here, she can add some rotation, which feels really lovely here. Or she could take the arm up on that left side, so that downstage arm up, just to get a nice increased stretch through there. Or, this gets a little more coordination challenged, she can add some flexion and extension through the spine. That's going to add some very dynamic activity through actually both hips. And in case you were wondering, everything is working here. It's not always easy to tell, but she's working hard everywhere. So there is the back stretch here, or the back split here. Before that we had the elephant, and before that we just did some of the high knee stretch and started this whole sequence with the little hip glides, working on strengthening the lateral system of the body. That's position 2.